Welcome back to the Messy Reformation. My name's Jason Rice, and I'm the Associate Pastor at Bethel CRC and Chaplain at Central Wisconsin Christian in Waupun, Wisconsin. My co-host is Willie Cronky. He's a member at Pease CRC in Pease, Minnesota. We're just a couple of guys who love the Christian Reformed Church and want to see Reformation happen in our denomination. But we realize that whenever Reformation happens in the history of the church, things get messy. And after the last couple of synods, and as we move into this rebuilding phase of the Reformation, things continue to be messy in the Christian Reformed Church. So we're taking the opportunity to have conversations with pastors and leaders throughout the Christian Reformed Church to find out what's going on in our denomination, but also to talk about what Reformation and rebuilding might look like. If you haven't already, take a moment to click subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming content. We're dropping episodes every single Sunday evening. It's also important for you to know that you are our marketing plan. We rely on you to spread the word about what we're doing at the Messy Reformation. We rely on you to share our content, and we also rely on you to give us 5-star reviews and provide good feedback for this podcast. You can also support us financially on Patreon or Substack. All the money raised is used to build the platform of the Messy Reformation. With all that said, we're going to get to this week's episode, which is part 1 of our conversation with Richard Britton III.
So, Richard, why don't you go ahead and just tell us a little bit about yourself and your family and the church that you're currently serving in?
Oh, thank you much, Willie. Thanks for having me, Willie and Dan. So myself, I grew up from 3rd grade in a suburb of Milwaukee, Brookfield, Wisconsin. There's a Christian Reformed church there. And so I grew up there. My parents both still attend there. And that was a really good experience. And so now that was from 3rd grade. So originally, my dad had been a pastor in rural Illinois. So I lived there in my earliest years, which I don't remember a ton. But my dad actually pastored a church that had left the PCUSA in the 80s and was not yet in the PCA. They're now PCA. But when he was the pastor, they were not in a denomination. They went through a rough spot. They actually had to buy their building and land back from the PCUSA in order to leave. Mm. So that was pretty rough. So they did not trust denominations. And my dad really encouraged them to join the PCA, which they eventually did. But my dad pastored there full-time for 5 years. Still has a great relationship with the church, goes back a couple times a year to preach. But for various reasons, after 5 years, really largely due to not a lot of denominational support, not pastoring a church not being in a denomination. So when we talk about the benefits of, being in the CRC, of course, the denominational structure and, encouragement, accountability, mutual prayer, all of that certainly is very beneficial. But so he pastored there for 5 years. And then after that, we moved to the Milwaukee area. And my parents, I don't think were really aware of the CRC before that. But, there wasn't, the Presbyterian options were limited, and Brookfield CRC had a good bumper pool table for me and my brother in the basement. And we made some good friends right away, and saw a solid minister as well. So Peter Verholst has been my minister pretty much my entire life. So a shout out to Pastor Peter.
And he's still there.
He's still there. That's right. So I see Pastor Peter every time I go back, and he's been a faithful minister there for many years. Praise the Lord for that. So, so then I spent my formative years in Brookfield, and I went to the University of Wisconsin for my college years, and got pretty, yes, Dan's flying the W. And I got pretty involved in Campus Crusade when I was in college. So obviously it's not called that anymore. It's CRU,
Yep.
CRU, Christ Reaching Universities. And that was really very good for me in college, just to have a group of brothers and sisters to run with for my 4 years, and to get in the Word with, and to worship and pray with, as well as Geneva Campus Church on University of Wisconsin's campus. So Mike Winowski was there for many years. He was my mentor in college, and really was largely influential in encouraging me to go to seminary. And I learned a lot from him. I respect him a ton, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to have had him as a mentor.
Very good.
Yeah.
Backing up just a little bit. So
Yeah.
you're saying you had mentors encouraging you to go to seminary. Was it people spurring you on to kind of pursue ministry, or when did you kind of get an internal sense of, I kind of feel called to be a pastor and to serve a local church?
Yes, I definitely got that in college as I was serving with CRU. Specifically, I spent a summer in Seaside Park, New Jersey, on a CRU summer mission. So I went out to Seaside Park with about 30 other college students, and we all got jobs in the community. I worked at the A&P grocery store, and we partnered with the local church so that when we weren't working, we were then, we could host Bible studies and host worship services. And so when we weren't working, we would do evangelism out on the boardwalk, and using kind of cruise model. And CRU has a survey that gets you into a conversation with someone. So I would go up to someone and I'd say, "Hey, Willie, I'm here for the summer doing a Christian leadership conference, and we're trying to gauge the spiritual atmosphere of the boardwalk. So if you could help me out for 5 minutes, I've got a 5-question survey that I'd love to do with you." And a lot of people would do it, especially if they were on vacation and just chilling on the boardwalk.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd have 5 questions. Willie, well, what are 3 things you're passionate about? What are 3 goals you have in your life? The third one gets a little more spiritual. What do you believe happens after death?
Mm-hmm.
4, if someone were to ask you, how do I become a Christian? What would you say? And 5, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much do you desire to know God personally? And if someone answered, so this was just meant to get us into a conversation.
Sure.
So sometimes, like, based off people's answers to those questions, the conversations could go a lot of different ways. But basically, I wanted the conversation to go in a direction such that I could share the gospel. So if someone was like, yeah, I really want to know God, or wish I had a better relationship with God, then I would say, well, hey, do you mind if I share with you what I believe? I believe you can know God. I believe you can be in relationship with God. And then I would proceed to share the 4 spiritual laws, which is now called the Knowing God Personally booklet, which basically shares the gospel. So, and that was great for me to do that. I had never done anything like that in my life. It really got me out of my comfort zone. It forced me to think about a lot of different issues. It helped me to better articulate my faith. And so while we were doing this, we were also just growing together as a community. So we were doing Bible studies together, and, we all had a mentor, and we were also trying to be a light in our workplace. So just to shine the light of Christ, and which in that area in New Jersey, we filled a lot of just like short-term jobs where a lot of people maybe don't necessarily have the best work ethic in those jobs or the best attitude. So we could pretty easily be a light in our workplace, and all of our kind of managers kind of saw that. And that's why in a lot of these CRU summer missions, the businesses love to have CRU kids come and work for them. So those relationships are established even before you get there for a CRU summer mission. But that was really pivotal for me. It's that then when I started to really feel an internal sense of call. And that was then confirmed when I went back on campus. I started my internship at Geneva Campus Church full time. It was a part-time internship, but I just mean like I was really involved in Geneva. Mike was my mentor. And then I got my first taste of things like worship planning, pastoral visitation. Mike and I had a lot of theological discussions. I kind of got a sense of how he went about the job of being a pastor. So that was really pivotal as well. And prior to that, I always had my father as an example. And, from an early age, have really fond memories of hearing my dad preach and worshiping with my family. And my dad obviously was my first discipler and always did a good job of making sure I was educated theologically and encouraging me to study the scriptures. So really, I had a great foundation from a young age with my father and Pastor Peter as well, just seeing him be a faithful hand at the wheel at Brookfield CRC and seeing his pastoral heart, seeing his love for the word. So kind of that foundation from a young age paired with some experiences I had in college really shaped my sense of internal call.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, when you were choosing where you were going to get your seminary education, where did you go and how did you end up deciding to go there?
Yes, so I visited Calvin. I was aware of Calvin growing up in the CRC. And, Pastor Peter had gone to Calvin. And I kind of knew, too, if you wanted to minister in the CRC, that you had to at least spend some time at Calvin.
Mm-hmm.
So Calvin was always a top choice. And I also had a lot of friends who did Calvin undergrad, who I grew up with at Brookfield Christian Reformed Church. So I went and I stayed with one of my good friends who was attending Calvin undergrad at the time. And I went to a conference in 2015, Missional Living of Scripture Conference. And I met some of the profs at that time. I think Corey Wilson was a big part of that conference and some other people. But I enjoyed my visit to Calvin and, really because I wanted to minister in the CRC, thought Calvin would be a good choice. I did look at Westminster West. I remember looking at like their pre-sem reading list and, and like my dad was also a big fan of Michael Horton.
Mm-hmm.
So I considered that, but it was kind of far away for me. I wanted to be closer to family, closer to roots. And those were really the two that I was kind of between, right? Those are the two that I looked at. To be honest, I didn't look at a lot of other seminaries that closely other than Westminster West and Calvin.
So that's what kind of led into your taking a call in Michigan. I mean, for the longest time, I've called you Britton in the Mitten, just because that's where you've been. And I was wondering, so did you specifically go out of your way to say, like, I want to pastor in West Michigan? Or were you open to other places too? Or you kind of knew where you wanted to be?
Right. So that's funny, Britton in the Mitten. It just worked out that way. So coming out of seminary, I applied to 40 plus churches coming out of seminary. And, went through the interview process with a lot of different churches. And at the end of the day, I had about three options. Bradenton CRC in Bradenton, Florida. There was an associate position there that I was one of the final two for. And then there was a church out in Oak Harbor, Whidbey Island, Washington State,
mm-hmm.
On the West Coast. And then Trinity CRC in Fremont, Michigan, which is an hour northwest of Grand Rapids. And yeah, that's basically for two reasons I chose Trinity CRC. First, I wanted to get preaching experience. And being a solo pastor versus an associate, I knew I would get a lot more preaching experience at Trinity CRC. Which, looking back, I think that was the right decision. I grew it a lot as a preacher over my 3.5, 4 years at Trinity, and then also it was close to family, which I valued. Closer to family than Washington State or Florida. So, yeah, that's how I ended up there. And my brother right now is looking for a job, so I tell him, like, hey man, you gotta send out a lot of applications, because not that the call process is exactly the same as the regular job seeking process. It's not, but the principle still applies that
cast your net as far as you can.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't want to jump too fast over your time in Fremont, but I mean, so Fremont, your Trinity CRC closed down. That was how you ended your time out there. And I mean, that's a really unique experience for a first-time pastor, young guy. Can you walk us through, like, how do you lead through that? How do you discern that together with the church, with God, and for yourself? I mean, that's a huge thing.
Yes, lots of prayer. And thankfully, at Trinity, we had a group that met for prayer meetings that was really faithfully devoted to prayer. We had some really faithful prayer warriors. A retired pastor and his wife, Case Van Wyk and Graymar. Jessie Rose, a woman who's just, her prayer life blows me away, and others too. So that was one thing that carried me through. And that final year was a group that was really faithful to prayer and encouraging elders. I'll always be grateful to Ron and Ryan Folkema, along with others, but them especially, who I knew just had my back, were praying for me, were encouraged me throughout the process. That was extremely important. It's vitally important that our elders really care for the pastor and pray for the pastor, support the pastor however they can. So thankfully, God really provided throughout my time there, even though there was some hard things toward the end. So yeah, maybe I can get into that. So I think at Trinity CRC is my first call, right? So I got my feet wet and everything. It was just, everything was new at the beginning. It's difficult for a pastor in their first call, learning how to write a sermon every week, doing your first baptisms, professions of faith, funerals, visits. Just everything is new. And it was a wonderful learning experience. I'm glad I kind of got thrown into that right away and was able to learn and grow. And I'm thankful for a really gracious counsel, a gracious co-worker and my worship director. People that really gave me that room to grow, and we're understanding that it was my first call. So I'm really thankful for that. Some things that kind of happened while I was there. So our beloved worship director did retire. I think that was about in 2023. And she had married a son of the church, had been there for 25 plus years. And the church really didn't know life without her as the worship director. And we had a lot of identity tied up in the music ministry of the church, a lot of identity tied up in our praise team and in our contemporary worship style. And when our worship director left, we really lost that. We just didn't have anyone who was capable of leading a praise team or anyone who was capable of leading a contemporary worship style. And we had about 20 plus people leave for a Wesleyan church in town that could offer that. So that was one thing that was hard during my time there. The other thing, well, there were multiple things. Another thing that hit was the HSR. And, one of our elders had a really great insight. He said, wow, if the affirming ideology can infiltrate a small town rural church like Trinity CRC Fremont, it can infiltrate anywhere. So for us, thankfully, our council was of one mind on the issue, holding the biblical position. But we did have some members who were not of the same mind on the issue, and that was hard because ultimately our church in Classis Muskegon did have to stand up for our biblical view of marriage and sexuality, and that was not popular among a few in our church. So then we had a few who left. We had some big givers leave that hurt us.
Mm-hmm.
So that all that kind of combined along with COVID. COVID did not help. I started during COVID, and we had to have some contentious discussions about how we were going to proceed with our policies. But this highlights God's providence. So one of our first council meetings, trying to decide what we were going to do, tensions were kind of high. We one of our elderly beloved members, I think, was in the hospital with COVID, and we were kind of fearful he was going to pass. And thankfully, he didn't. He is still with us, but it was a hard time. And we had one elder who just was really wanted us to remain open through it all without restrictions. And in hindsight, I think this elder was actually very prophetic. In hindsight, I wish we would have been stronger on that. I mean, like Hebrews 10, do not forsake the meeting, the gathering together believers. And he was really strong on that at the time. And I'll own that mistake for me. I think I let fear get the best of me and, being too cautious when it came to not meeting together. But anyway, so this elder was kind of putting his view out in the council meeting, and basically I kind of lost it, and I think I've apologized to him since. I lost it and spoke in an ungodly way toward him, and he was so gracious through all of that. And that elder turned out to be like one of my greatest encouragements throughout my ministry there, and a man I dearly respect. And I'm really grateful that he was long suffering with my ungodliness at the time. So,
yeah. Well, and we give ministers a lot of grace when it comes to dealing with the embryonic stages of COVID. I mean, for in all reality, no one knew exactly what we were dealing with, and now you're having to be, a theologian, an epidemiologist, and an expert of law all at the same time, just so that you can maybe have a quarter of your church meeting. So,
right.
I think there was a lot of pressure put on ministers, and are we going to meet or are we going to not? And one thing that we need to understand is it's not the minister themselves that are making these sole decisions, but they're actually working with and are under the authority of their elders, their consistory. And when those decisions are being made, you do so together, and you try and discern the will, of God in this together. And that doesn't mean you always get it right. And
yes,
and you praise God for moments, honestly, when you get it wrong, and you can learn from it. And I think that was, and I'm not even saying you necessarily got it wrong, because I think there's a lot of areas of conscience that it's really how the Lord is determining what's best in your context, and then trying to discern those things going forward. So right and wrong it's kind of hard to paint those lines in the early stages of COVID. Right, Dan?
Yeah. Did you graduate in 19 or in 20?
20.
So, I mean, you graduated right in the thick of it. I mean, I'm assuming didn't even get to finish your semester really in person.
My last semester I did from home.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so your diploma is suspect anyway.
Right.
I asked that. What I mean, like, what was, and I don't want to put. I'm not trying to put Calvin Seminary through the ringer or anything, but I mean, what was? I mean, like, the seminary had an opportunity to kind of encourage students, like, hey, and I mean, I guess I heard from people here, like there had been, I don't know if they would call them plagues, but there had been flus like 100 years ago. And so the church has been through this before. Society has been through this before to a degree, not in the lifetimes of most of our members, but it has. But yeah, I mean, like from an academic standpoint, what was the seminary encouraging pastors to do? Or yeah,
That's a good question. So, my experience was, we started the semester in person. This is right when COVID hit, like early 2020. And there was like an email that went out in the middle of February. And that email basically said, hey, we're ending in-person classes, and we encourage everyone to, quarantine in their apartments and seminary housing. And everything got moved online. And so then, we were experimenting with meeting via Google Meet. And, the seminary has had good technology for, because of their distance learning program, they had good tech for kind of virtual learning, which was a blessing. So basically, we had our own little pods in our seminary housing, and we'd have study parties. And, like I had my little group I was hanging out with. Some of you know Eric DeLange. His house was like a hub for some of us. So like me, Ryan Vanderwees, Micah Ringelberg, would go to Eric DeLange's place, and we'd kind of like hang out and study together. And that was actually a really joyous time. I feel like it bound us together as students in our little pods. But yeah, we weren't meeting in person. And I remember that this was during the seminary ping pong tournament. So I had like a ping pong match scheduled the day the email went out that we weren't meeting in person. And I was really disappointed and kind of thinking like, man, can we like at least have some fun and like play a little ping pong? But like you guys said, it was just, that was the very early stages. So much was unknown about what the virus was and how dangerous it was and how it was going to impact. So we were kind of just operating in the unknown. So about halfway through March, I did go home, and a lot of people did go home, and I lived with my parents and finished my classes via Google Meet and all virtually through discussion posts and writing essays. And I was in ethics with Professor Tuninga at the time, and disappointed that went online because I absolutely loved his lectures in person. Professor Tuninga is it was a privilege to listen to him lecture. And Michael Williams as well. I was in Michael Williams' Art of Hebrew Narrative. We were going through the Joseph narrative in Hebrew. That was one of my favorite classes in seminary.
Very cool.
Yeah, so finishing it online was okay, but yeah. So like you guys said, it was kind of hard to know at the time, but certainly I'm not sure we were prepared to deal with the issue theologically. I'm not sure we were.
No, and that's fair. Like I think, so I had been in ministry for 5 years. I think at that point I had started my, serving here in Baldwin. I was here for about a year before COVID hit. And I remember there's a sermon that I remember that I have a remark from that sticks in my head. I don't know if it does in anyone else's, but I said something that I wish I could take back. It was an assumption that I made about how things were and what was right at the time. And, it was based on the information we had. And And I think things changed after that. And so, yeah, it's a really hard thing to know, yeah, what exactly you should have been teaching people. And yeah. And again,
And that's
every church did a little bit different. In Minnesota, me and Willie,
Yep.
two sides of a river, and
Yep.
Minnesota was way more closed down than us here in freedom loving Western Wisconsin. So that was a different so I live 35 minutes from Woodbury, which is the eastern suburb of the Twin Cities. And there was months that went by where I did not go over the river, which was very unusual, and to this day still is unusual. But that was, yeah, it was because of what was open and what wasn't. And so churches, yeah, I had colleagues in our classes who dealt with things differently, and I respect them for it. It didn't make me hate them or belittle them or think myself better because we opened earlier. But it was, we continue to see the effects of that in our churches from what happened. So, yeah.
Well, and that's why we're commanded to grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. And
Amen.
but again, that just goes to show Dan moves to Lake Superior, and then a year later, all COVID breaks loose.
I also bring droughts with me. Okay, I bring droughts. So
You're just full of surprises.
I have not seen good rain and good snow, in particular good snow, wherever I've gone. So sorry.
Well, Richard, another thing that we actually want to call to attention here is actually the last few synods. I can tell that you are someone who pays attention. You've kind of got your thumb on the scale of what's been going on in the denomination. And I don't know if you know this or not, but we've had some interesting synods over the last few years.
Oh, really, Willie?
Oh, really?
I hadn't heard.
You hadn't heard. So I'm kind of wondering, with both churches that you've served, respectively, where were they kind of at in terms of, the issue of human sexuality, how the denomination has moved forward, positions of leadership, covenant for office bearer stuff? Have both of the congregations you've served been in lockstep and in support of you and some of your endeavors here?
Yes. So Trinity CRC 2023, kind of the year after Synod decides that, yes, the church has always believed that unchastity includes homosexual sex. Church has always believed that God designed sex for heterosexual marriage. And our confessions, which are a true interpretation of the word, teach that. The church has always held to that, even pre-1973.
That's all we have for this week. If you want to help us out and support the Messy Reformation, another thing you can do is sign up for our newsletter through Substack. That way you'll get episodes and summaries sent directly into your email inbox. It also gives us the ability to communicate with our audience, which is one of the biggest struggles of a podcast. So head over to the Messy Reformation on Substack and sign up for our newsletter. But until then, don't forget this is Christ's church, and he bought it with his blood. And we've been warned that wolves will come in trying to destroy the flock. So keep a close watch on your life and on your doctrine. Preach the word in season and out of season, and keep fighting the good fight in this messy Reformation.